Good evening, everyone. My name is Maureen Wilson. It is September the 23rd, 2021. I'm proud to serve as your Ward 1 counselor, and it's an honor to be here with you this evening, and thanks for joining us. We're here to discuss the Pearl Kent Bicycle Boulevard pilot project. Before getting into the agenda, I will be reading a land acknowledgement. The City of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the City of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. So once again, welcome. This is the agenda that will guide us for the evening. I will introduce panelists in one moment. We will give an overview of how to do the Q&A, then we will get to the presentation, and then of course we will do the question and answer. So if I could introduce the panelists right now. Joining me this evening from the Sustainable Mobility Division of Planning and Economic Development in the City of Hamilton is Trevor Jenkins, Project Manager. From Transportation Operations and Maintenance in the Public Works Department is Mike Field, the Acting Director, Mushfiq Rahman, he's a Senior Project Manager, and Bakar Rahad, a Project Manager in the Pedestrian and Cycling Engineering Division. Also joining us is Zibi Petch from IBI. She's the manager of their active transportation. I think at this point, I'll hand it over to Trevor. I will be sitting here and listening to the questions and the answers, and that means there's more time for you. So Trevor, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor, and good evening, everyone. As the Councillor mentioned, my name is Trevor Jenkins, and I'm the Project Manager for the City for the Pearl Kent Bike Boulevard. I'd just like to reiterate, thank you everyone for joining us again this evening to learn more about this project. I'll hand it over to Zibi Petch, who will take us through a walk about what a bike boulevard is and walk through some of the proposed changes for this corridor. So it's all yours, Zibi.
Thanks, Trevor. Good evening, everyone. So as mentioned, I'll provide an overview of the proposed changes along the corridor, and then we'll open it up to questions. So our project limits for this project include Pearl and Kent Street between Amelia and Canada, along with the two short connections along Canada and Hunter to connect to Lock Street. So these are primarily low speed and low volume residential streets now. We think through some design changes, there's an opportunity here to create a really attractive corridor for people walking and cycling. You can see on the map here that from the perspective of the cycling network, this is an important north-south corridor. It provides an alternative to Lock Street through the Crickendall neighborhood, and it intersects some key east-west cycling routes along Charlton and Herkimer. So the concept of a bicycle boulevard along this corridor was originally identified and funded through the 2018 Ward 1 participatory budget process. There was also a volunteer-led James Walk here in 2019. And I'll also note that bike boulevards are identified as part of the city's COVID-19 recovery mobility plan. Project objectives include expanding the citywide cycling network with connections to existing east-west facilities, enhancing corridor safety and livability through calming vehicular traffic and speeds, as well as opportunities to introduce beautification, and using a pilot approach with rapid implementation to grow our understanding of how bicycle boulevards and applications work in Hamilton. So a bit of background on bicycle boulevards and what they consist of. These are not typically the same as other forms of cycling infrastructure around the city, like our protected bike lanes on Cannon or Bay. These are a little bit different and generally, except for contraflow movements, do not involve providing dedicated space for cyclists. Instead, with bicycle boulevards, we try to calm vehicle speeds and volumes and create a safe and welcoming street for pedestrians and cyclists, with cyclists actually sharing the road with vehicles. These are slow speed, low volume streets where vulnerable road use are prioritized with various treatments depending on operating conditions. Access for local vehicles are maintained, but cut-through traffic is discouraged. You may have also heard these referred to as slow streets, neighborhood greenways, or quiet street routes in other cities. So this provides a bit more information about the range of treatments that may be considered along a bike boulevard. They generally always include level 1 and level 2, so signage and pavement markings. These help to guide users along the corridor with wayfinding, directional markers, and bike route signs. And then depending on the specific conditions within each block, other elements such as intersection treatments, speed management, or traffic diversion may also be considered. So for example, a section of the corridor with higher operating speeds may warrant more intensive speed management. These images help to give you a sense of how bike boulevards look and feel using, you'll see the use of wayfinding directional markers on the pavement marking there, signage, and some examples of traffic diversion, helping to prevent cut-through traffic. So we'll zoom out from sort of a high-level introduction to bike boulevards and take a look at specific applications along Pearl Kent. These images show you the types of treatments that are being specifically proposed through this project. So the top left shows us directional wayfinding markings that help guide cyclists along a corridor. Then we have signage that helps to identify the route as a bicycle boulevard and add some branding. There are also curb extensions that help to narrow the road, typically around intersections, and reduce vehicular speeds. The bottom right image shows an example of a modified or realigned intersection, which is applied to help slow vehicles through an intersection and improve pedestrian safety. Traffic circles are used to enhance the public realm and slow turning vehicles. And then finally, the bottom left shows us a Contraflow bike lane. This is used to provide access for cyclists in the opposite direction along one-way streets. This project is proposed to be implemented as a pilot with an opportunity to test the design and adapt it over time. So materials may vary from simple, quick to install materials versus more robust long-term materials. We can test performance over time. And an important element of bicycle boulevards is providing greening and planting opportunities, and those would be explored either with or after initial install. So let's start from the bottom of our corridor, Kent Street, and sort of talk about what this looks like. So a typical mid-block section along Kent Street will remain very similar to today. There's currently parking on one side with two-way vehicular traffic, and this will remain as is, with just the addition of pavement markings and signage. Parking will not typically be removed mid-block. And we'll walk through the corridor from, again, south to north. So to orient you, Amelia is shown on the left of the screen. That's the south end of the corridor. North is to your right. And so we'll walk through in that order. So starting at the south end, you'll see this green line along the full limits of the corridor. That represents the pavement markings and signage that will be throughout. And then you'll see individual features at each location. So the first feature you'll see is a curb extension proposed right at the corner of Amelia and Kent, and that will help to slow turning vehicles. And then our next feature is proposed at the Glenfern and Kent intersection. And so that would be proposed as a realigned intersection. You'll see here, again, just to control speeds through that intersection. Moving northerly as we approach Aberdeen, no specific interventions, although we have noted the need to improve detection of cyclists right at the intersection of Aberdeen to make it easier for cyclists to trigger the pedestrian signal that's at that location. So that may or may not be part of the initial pilot, but it's certainly a need that we've identified. Continuing to move north, we've proposed a couple of traffic circles. So these would be installed in the middle of the intersection and help to slow turning speeds at the intersections of Homewood and Herkimer, in addition to our pavement markings and signage. And then as we approach Charlton and HAAA Park, you'll see that we have proposed one section of Contraflow bike lane. So this would be a short section of Contraflow bike lane just to allow cyclists that are traveling southbound through the park to make a left turn to continue further south along Kent Street. So just to help with that offset intersection. So with that introduction of the Contraflow bike lane, we do expect to lose about one parking space in that location. The wayfinding elements of the bike boulevard are expected to be carried through HAAA Park to guide people walking and cycling out to Pearl Street. I'll just note that HAAA Park renewal study is currently underway. We've got the link there. Through that renewal project, pathways through the park will be upgraded, and there's an attempt there to reduce conflicts at the playground. Okay, so then we arrive at Pearl Street. So again, continuing to move north along Pearl Street. This section of Pearl Street presently operates one-way southbound for vehicles. So in order to provide two-way access for cyclists, we're proposing to add a Contraflow northbound bike lane here. I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. So with our Contraflow bike lane coming down to the intersection of Bold, we're right at the bottom of the hill there. So we did want to introduce a curb extension on the south side of Bold just to improve visibility for drivers right at that intersection to ensure that they can see cyclists and pedestrian coming down that hill. This should give you a better idea of exactly what's proposed mid-block through this segment. So we have two sort of typical sections along this stretch. We have sections without parking and sections with parking. So for the sections without parking, we're basically just looking at narrowing the existing travel lane and providing a northbound Contraflow bike lane along the right side of the road. Along the frontage of 137 Pearl, there's existing parking. So that parking would be maintained, but it would be shifted away from the curb, and we would have our Contraflow bike lane come between the parking and the sidewalk. And that will have a couple of benefits in that we have a little section of parking protected bike lane, but we also improve conditions for pedestrians along that stretch. It's quite constrained there. So as we head north of Bold, approaching Hunter, we will keep the Contraflow bike lane on the right side of the road, and I'll show you on the next slide what that cross section looks like. As we approach the existing active transportation bridge, there will be some new curb cuts to help improve access to and from the bridge. And let's take a look at this mid-block section. So the existing condition, we have parking on the right side of the road. We're proposing to flip the parking to the left side of the road and run the Contraflow bike lane up the right side of the road. We don't anticipate a huge change in the number of parking spots based on the driveways on both sides. So then we get to our 2 block stubs to connect into Lock Street. So just to keep you on your toes, we've changed orientation here. North is to the top of the screen. So you're looking at Hunter running east-west. So through this block, all we're proposing is again to just continue that directional pavement marking and signage to provide you with guidance out to Lock Street. And same with Canada, we would have the same pavement markings and signage to provide guidance to and from Lock. And with that, I will turn it back to Trevor to talk about project timelines and next steps.
So thank you, Zibby. So in terms of where we are, right now we are in the preliminary design stage. So this is when we wanted to meet with the community to share information on the preliminary plans, answer your questions, and incorporate your feedback. Moving forward, we will advance to detailed design later this year, and we are looking to implement this as the project in early 2022. And as noted on the slide, that this design concept is subject to refinement through consultation, further analysis, and detailed design. Next slide, thanks. So as I mentioned, we really do want to hear from you. So we have set up a comment form where you can submit your feedback. It's available at www.hamilton.ca/newlanes. You are also invited to send your comments directly to us via email to sustainable.mobility@hamilton.ca. We would ask that you try to have your comments into us by Friday, October 8th, which is just over 2 weeks from now. After that, We will review all the comments and we'll refine the design based off the feedback. We'll then move, as I mentioned before, to detailed design and work towards finalizing the design through the later parts of this year and early 22, and then implement the pilot in 2022 and then begin to monitor and adapt. So thank you for your time, and I'll hand it back to Stephanie so we can move into the Q&A section of the discussion.
Why are the two connections needed to Locke Street, Hunter and Canada? I'm concerned about the increase in traffic on the Pearl Street Bridge.
I can start with that answering, and Zibby, feel free to join in. The reason for the connections to the Hunter and Canada section, maybe we can go back to the overview map. It's ultimately to provide for the cyclists who are traveling northbound along Pearl in the Contraflow lane. They would be going onto Hunter Street, so that'd be the natural left in order to connect them with the existing bike lanes that already exist there. Similarly, for the Canada Street connection, it is to connect cyclists traveling along Locke to allow them to travel southbound on the Pearl Street connection. As Zibby mentioned in the conversation, along those two segments, we are only looking at providing pavement markings and wayfinding, so we don't expect a huge amount. So there really is no physical change per se, as well as one of the longer term visions for this corridor is to continue it further north. However, at this time, we are still waiting to coordinate with the LRT team on that. So we do want to provide these connections to Locke Street in order to provide a kind of that interim measure right now. Anything else to add there, Zibby?
The pavement along this route and through to York is generally poor, which is a huge problem for cyclists right now. Will the street paving be upgraded as part of this project?
I'm just trying to check the programming for repavement within engineering services, because from an operational perspective, we don't have any plans to resurface. So we would just be looking to maintain it. Go ahead.
Well, sorry, while you're looking at that, I can talk about there's some work coming to the Strathcona section of Locke as part of some water work that's happening. And then there is discussion on the other portions of the trail of the Boulevard.
My dashboard's not cooperating with me, the asset management dashboard, unfortunately, so I can't answer if that's in the books. But I think the answer to the question is that we aren't looking at doing resurfacing or reconstruction associated with a pilot directly.
Yeah, it's indirect. Thanks. When will the northern portion of the project be undertaken, Maine to York?
So the northern section is the phase 2 of this project, and it is a priority for us. Right now, what we do need to do is coordinate those works with the LRT team to make sure that any bicycle crossing there is consistent and provided. With the MOU now being signed and that office being staffed, we hope to be able to move forward once we can coordinate with that team. But right now, there's no scheduled estimate for when that will happen.
How exactly will the cyclists traveling south out of the HAAA grounds cross Herkimer to the bike lane stub?
So as a southbound cyclist coming through HAAA, the onus would be on you to safely negotiate that movement. So you wouldn't have right of way to make that movement. You would be looking out for through vehicles and then making that maneuver when safe to do so. So there's no, we can't provide a priority crossing because we're so close to the intersection. So it would just be a yield movement whenever you can find a space to cross.
Do the traffic circles use any additional space? How do the traffic circles enhance safety for pedestrians, especially children, as this is a primary school route for children walking? Are the traffic circles cement, asphalt, or planted? Do the circles bring traffic any closer to the homes?
So I'll start with that, and then maybe I'll hand it over to Zibby and Mike if they want to add in anything further. In terms of how do the traffic circles help enhance pedestrian safety, one of the complaints we often hear about with four-way stops is vehicles aren't actually stopping, or they're doing a rolling stop. So by having the traffic circle, it does force drivers to slow down in order to navigate around the feature, which can help to provide this more enhanced safety and avoid those people who choose to run stop signs. Similarly, in terms of sort of what the materials are, there are different options. It could be a cement or asphalt one. It could be a temporary one or done with planters. So those are things we are looking into for some different options there. The more permanent ones tend to be a bit more effective, and if in that regard, Zibby, do you want to add on anything there?
No, I mean the primary purpose of them is to make the movement slower through the intersection. So anytime we can reduce vehicular speeds, we improve safety outcomes, particularly for vulnerable road users. So that's sort of the intent there.
Yep. Anything else you want to add, Mike, into that?
No, I think you two explained it perfectly. It's all about managing speeds of vehicles through the intersection with safety in mind.
The main purpose of traffic circuit is to reduce the conflict. So at the intersection, there are different conflicts. So if we reduce the speed, the amount of conflict is reduced. That's the whole purpose of traffic circle, basically from traffic point of view.
It seems like the plan so far has minimal impact on reducing street parking spots. Is that the case, and will that attempt continue with the northern portion or second phase?
Yep. So we are very cognizant that parking is at a premium in this neighborhood. Many of the homes do not have driveways or off-street parking available to them, as well as we have conducted a number of parking counts throughout the last few months, which really help reiterate this in most of the case. As we do look to move the second phase, that is a priority for us as well. And it is something that we will continue to be very mindful of and try to preserve on-street parking for the community whenever possible.
Is there going to be a separation between the pedestrian path and the cycle path in the HAAA grounds?
So as Zibby mentioned, the HAAA work is still ongoing, the renewal design. We have been in contact with them and have had discussions. One of the focuses of their work is if you go to that website on the engagehamilton.ca/HAAA renewal, some of the design concepts that they presented in June are available there. So one of the focuses, for instance, separating the playgrounds from where the cyclists are, since they are very close and there have potential for conflict. So we have been working with them to provide a better separation, particularly between where the younger kids may be playing and enjoying themselves, as well as the cyclists. For a bike boulevard, this tends to be families that use it, slower moving people. It's not your, for lack of a term, high-speed road cyclists. So there tends to be more speed management on their part. So they tend not to have the same high speeds that some people may be concerned about in other areas.
He's curious to know, has anyone tried to ride the route from Bowl to the HAAA? The hill is very steep, and if using a Sobe bike, most riders will have to ride their bike as there's no gearing. The same applies to the route up the hill from Bowl to the pedestrian bridge over the railway. So any thoughts to the fact that we do have two steep hills going north and south?
It might also be a good segue to talk about e-scooters or e-bikes, but I will say we fully acknowledge that those are steep hills. I have walked up them many times. I have yet to bike up them. So from our perspective, we're trying to do everything we can to think about safety at the intersections associated with speed going down the hill, but we recognize that through that block, we do have steep hills there, and that may be a deterrent for this route. That's one of the trade-offs with this route as a bike boulevard, but we feel that there's other elements to the connectivity that make this still a worthwhile venture. But totally agree, it's a steep hill. There's not a lot that we can do about that topography. I don't know, Trevor, if you want to chime in on new technologies that may be coming to Hamilton.
I think maybe the only thing I'd add on to Zibby's comment there is, as you approach the mountain, there always will be some climb and some hills. So it is kind of that trade-off: is would you rather climb on a quieter street where speeds are managed, or would you want to do it on a busier street? So we do recognize there is that hill and there is that trade-off there. But this corridor does provide good connectivity through Kirkendall, then eventually on to Strathcona, and it does provide a slower, safer place for cyclists to climb. They might be on the Sobe, and whether it's the 3-gear version or the 8-gear version, if they're in the lower gear, they still have that, bit of that better climbing ability.
Traffic circles bring traffic closer to the homes or property lines.
I think maybe it's a concern about as vehicles travel around the traffic circle that they would encroach towards the sidewalk, if I'm interpreting that correctly. So I'll just say that with any traffic circles or traffic calming interventions, we'll do models of how vehicles move through the intersection. So we'll run an auto turn of what that looks like and make sure that vehicles can safely navigate that feature without encroaching into the sidewalk or beyond the sidewalk any property. So I wouldn't foresee any concerns with that. And obviously, as we advance through the design phases, that would be reviewed very carefully.
Any thoughts about reducing the amount of traffic vehicles on the route? Is cut-through traffic an issue now? Just noticing there are no diverters or other new limitations.
Yeah, so when we did look at the traffic volumes for this corridor, they were fairly low and in the comfortable shared use area zone of the Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18, which guides the selection of different types of cycling facilities. So it was in the appropriate range. If there are concerns about cut-through traffic, we'd love to hear them. Either send us the email or fill out the comment form, and we can review those and see, do some additional study to see if there would be justification for those types of measures as well.
Will the traffic circles be landscaped to add greenery, reduce non-permeable surface, and enhance neighborhood beauty?
So I can start. So a permanent traffic circle would be landscaped in some way in order to, add some beauty to the neighborhood. If they use a temporary material, then it might be might have some different design features on a temporary basis, like the example that was shown. But really, our goal with any of these traffic calming features is to incorporate as much greening as possible, just to really add that, respect the neighborhood and show that beauty and the value that is already there, and help to support our urban tree forestry and planting strategy, as well as any kind of climate change aspects as well.
Kent Street from Stanley to Charlton is very busy during a diversion from the mountain or the highway. How does emergency detour routes impact a bike boulevard?
Yeah, so that's a good point. Those are the type of comments we'd love to see and hear about. If there are issues that your community is experiencing that might not experience in a typical day, it sounds like there are some concerns around traffic infiltration along the section of Kent from Charlton up to Aberdeen area. So we can look into that, and we can take that feedback and do initial analysis to see, if some sort of diverter or other changes might be justified. So we do have two online ways to get feedback. So the first is our online comment form. So we're just asking things you like, things you might have concern about, and any of the other comments about the proposed design. So that's available at hamilton.ca/newlanes. And that's open until October 8th. As well, if you just want to provide any additional comments outside of the forum or anything else, you can email us directly at sustainable.mobility@hamilton.ca. As of noon today, I've replied to any comments I've already received. So if there's any folks who've already submitted comments, let me know if there's any additional information you want after this session, after you've learned a bit more details. But again, any feedback on the proposed design, if there's any additional issues that you think could potentially be addressed around topics. So yeah, appreciate any feedback you might have.
Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your evening to join us tonight. The information has been set out. The contact information has been set out. I think Trevor mentioned we need to pick a date for a deadline, and it's October the 8th. So that's about 2 weeks. Thank you again. I'd like to extend my thanks to all the staff who joined us this evening and led the discussion with their expertise. Thank you again.